My entitled family kicked me out, then demanded my 3-bedroom house for my brother's family of 6. All because I don't have kids. I'm a single male in his early 30s. My 29-year-old brother is already the father of 4 children. He had his first at the age of 22, followed by the second a year later, the third 2 years later, and the fourth just a few months ago. His wife, my sister-in-law, and I do not get along because she constantly tries to get a rise out of me by acting superior, then becomes an intense, self-victimizing drama queen if I retort in any way. She can cry in an instant and put on an exceptionally convincing performance to get pity from almost anyone. My parents and brother adore her, despite the fact that they are fully aware of her true nature and do not care. She's really attractive, I'll grant her that, but she's so horrible that I could never be drawn to her. She also refuses to work, despite having a college degree, and my mother cheerfully helps with the kids all day. So their entire financial situation is based on my brother. This also means they can't afford to live anyplace other than my parents' house, and privacy is a concern with all of them living together in a 3-bedroom house built in the 1960s. Growing up, my younger brother was likewise a clear favorite. We are 3 years apart in age, yet he acquired a superiority complex since I was severely punished if I responded to his shenanigans in any manner. Back then, it was clear that my parents cared more about him because he got the lion's share of everything unless other family members called them out on it, which happened quite frequently. Which is why my parents packed us all up and moved us around 150 miles away from them, so they only saw us on vacations because it was a 3-hour drive. My brother was physically abusive to me on several occasions, flirted excessively with my first girlfriend until she broke up with me, and laughed at any disaster I experienced. When I was upset, my parents would just tell me to suck it up. I only received equal treatment when my parents needed to maintain appearances. I confess it was amusing to see the expressions on their faces when they had to treat me equally with my brother on birthdays and Christmas because other people were present. We had nosy relatives who liked gossiping and drama, so my parents tried to disguise what was actually going on and threatened to take away all of my belongings if I didn't keep my mouth shut. If anything, it made my parents happier when I turned 18 and moved out, because it meant they no longer had to provide for me. I wasn't quite out with high school when I moved out, but couch surfing was far preferable to living with them. Since leaving home, I've kept in touch with a few people. They didn't even attend my high school graduation, but I didn't care. From that point forward, I would only see my parents and brother on holidays, just like the rest of the family. The beginning of the 2020 pandemic was not kind to me. I lost my work and was unable to renew the lease on the apartment because my roommate also lost his job, and neither of us could afford the property with unemployment money. It was a rented 2-bedroom condo that I absolutely enjoyed. As the lease expired, my roommate departed early to go back in with relatives, and I had to sell practically all of my belongings since I would be homeless if I didn't downsize drastically. I definitely shouldn't have rented such an expensive house, but I enjoyed living the high life until it didn't treat me well. I realized I should have lived somewhere cheaper so I could have saved more money to fall back on. But I had a plan. I own a truck because I've always enjoyed trucks. So I got a $1,000 camper in decent condition and mounted it on my truck so I could live in it for a bit. It was supposed to be temporary, but I ended up living in it for much longer than I had anticipated. I was hoping to be able to live out of the camper at my parents' house, where my brother and his family also dwell. But when I asked my parents if I might stay for a while, they said they had a full house and didn't want me there. Plus, we hadn't gotten along for the past decade. They stated they'd only let me park my camper there if I paid them about what it would cost to rent an apartment in my neighborhood. That was far too much just to park my camper. I was unemployed and attempting to save as much of my unemployment benefits as I could until I could find a new job. With the rent they were asking, I could have easily lived in an apartment. My folks termed my camper an eyesore and urged me to take a walk because we couldn't agree. My sister-in-law found it very humorous that I had to live in a camper. My brother joined her in pointing and insulting me, referring to me as a homeless bum. On the first night when I had nowhere else to go, I slept in my truck camper in a store parking lot. I was terrified that someone might try to break in. Needless to say, I did not sleep well that night. I had nowhere else to go because any other relatives who owned houses were rather far away, and all of my pals were in apartments. I was also really tied to my surroundings, so I didn't want to just leave. I'd also had my mail forwarded to a friend's place, which was the only way I could still receive it. Finding a safe area to park was tough. I began seeking a job similar to my old one. It takes months to live the nomadic camper life. At the time, I had to deal with everything from beggars and drug users to people telling me to leave because my camper was an eyesore. Someone who instructed me to move claimed to be part of a HOA. I wasn't even parked on a street with houses, and when I asked what the HOA was, they were quite hostile and threatened me. I moved my camper nevertheless to avoid the problem. To ensure a consistent source of electricity, I learned to plug in a lengthy extension cord anywhere I could to recharge my camper batteries. This entailed sneaking around and putting it into an exterior outlet of a random building while parked on the street. I realize it's a bad thing to do, but I needed to keep my batteries charged, so my refrigerator stayed cool. I had a little solar power bag for charging my phone, but I didn't have a generator, which is noisy and requires fuel. So I did what I needed to do. After months of living like this, I eventually found a new job. I had to relocate to a neighboring city to find work that did not entail retail. I worked in retail during college and swore myself I'd never do it again, but I was almost ready to break that promise. I was still receiving unemployment benefits, but I didn't have a secure place to live and didn't want to be jobless when they ran out. Plus, I was completely bored. I had little else to do than read, view movies on a small portable DVD player, use my phone or laptop, and keep track of where I might park, and use the local public restrooms. I kind of envy the Japanese since they have public bathhouses. We could definitely use something like that around here. When I finally found a new job, I essentially lived in the back lot of the building by the warehouse, where no one else appeared to bother utilizing the old employee parking spaces because they were so far in the back that the area was almost forgotten. My boss, the firm owner, actually preferred this arrangement because I was willing to work any shift I could get as long as I got enough sleep. He even let me remove the camper from my truck and park it in one of the slots so I could drive around without it. I'm not sure if this was legal, but no one harassed us about it the entire time I lived there. I didn't have to deal with many trespassers. There were a few, but security personnel led them away. I was almost always available when they needed me and worked nearly every day of the week. My boss allowed me to plug my camper into the building for power and water, and I paid a little amount of rent by working for free on Sundays, when only the janitor and security guard were in the office. Aside from that, I generally had to shower at a friend's place or at my local gym because the camper had no shower and only a portable toilet. I didn't want to fill it because emptying it is a dreaded duty, so I used other bathrooms whenever possible. I had a key to the warehouse and could use the bathroom at any time. I was even on first-name terms with the night security guy, who has now become one of my closest friends. The camper was simple to heat in the winter with a little electric heater. Summers were unpleasant, and because the camper lacked air conditioning, I had to purchase a used portable air conditioner to make things acceptable. I got a lot of overtime pay and learned some new skills from other employees. Eventually, midway through this year, I secured a better position in the company as a supervisor and began earning a higher pay than my previous employment. That's when I decided I wanted a home. The scare I experienced from losing my condo made me realize I wanted something far more dependable in the long run. I looked for something close to work and discovered a 3-bedroom manufactured home on a small plot of land just 2 miles away. I was able to get it for $10,000 cheaper than the asking price somehow. I used virtually all of my savings for a down payment and was approved for a home loan. I didn't have to live in a camper any longer. There was enough room for me to reverse my truck behind the house, remove the camper, and set it up in the backyard. So I set it up as its own small structure in case I needed it again. When I was completely situated in the house, I was foolish enough to boast about it in my book of faces. My family viewed the post, which is where this really began. After a few weeks, my parents, brother and his family paid me an unannounced visit to give me a tour of my home. I didn't even give them my address, so I'm still not sure how they found out where I live. None of my pals have confessed, and no family members have previously visited me. So I'm wondering whether they trailed me at work and followed me home. It would really not surprise me. When I opened the door, they virtually all pushed their way in like rowdy travelers, then simply began making themselves at home. They all kept digging around, and my sister-in-law had this creepy smirk that she kept flashing at me, and I only afterward realized why. And it enraged me like a bull on steroids who has just been stung by a hornet. My parents were continually telling me how much extra space I have today, which is too much for someone like me who doesn't have a wife or children. Sure, not now, but perhaps later. My brother frequently mentioned that my house had more space than our parents, and that it was also closer to his employment. There are red flags all around. Eventually my brother requested me to speak privately. Everyone else abruptly left the room and piled onto the front porch. That's when I realized they had a strategy. My brother, let's call him Jason for simplicity, stated the house was too big for me alone, and that I should let him move in with his family because his wife is expecting their 4th child, and my house is much closer to his employment. He pointed out that I already had the camper, so I could live outside while they stayed in the main house. And I would like to point out that Jason never mentioned offering rent. Mind you, he has a nice job. He also mentioned that there will be adjustments, including curfews, and that I would not be able to walk in at any time without prior warning. If it wasn't my brother, I'd assume the person I was speaking with was insane. But Jason lost his marbles a long time ago, as a result of our parents treating him like he was the center of the universe. I tried to speak, but he kept talking over me as if I had no say in the situation. There was no way I was going to rent out my house or sections of it to him. Other people, perhaps simply so I could pay off my mortgage more easily, but not him or his ugly wife. I'd seen videos of this similar situation online many times before, but I never imagined I'd be living it, because I felt it was ridiculous. However, my dad, brother, and sister-in-law all meet the description of narcissistic entitled crazy. So I grabbed up my phone, set it to record, and just held onto it. Jason didn't seem to care or notice what I'd done, and instead sat there with his arms waving around, babbling about all the reasons he wanted my house. Then he moved from saying that to appearing as if it was a done thing, reaching out to shake my hand. That's when I finally showed my backbone and yelled, "Hell no!" I said it loud enough that Jason fell backward for a moment. I had rarely raised my voice to him at that level since I was chastised by our parents whenever I did. But it was my house, not theirs. My spine can shine as much as it wants here. I stood up and told him that my house was not for sale, and acted as if I would let him move in just because he wanted to make it happen. I bought my house for myself, and it's not my responsibility that he keeps having children and staying with our parents because he can't afford to move out. Jason got as close to me as he could without touching me, telling me I didn't deserve the house and that he wanted a better location for his family to live. I laughed in his face and said it was total bullshit because I had worked hard to be able to buy my home. Of course I earned it. Jason began ranting that I don't have a wife or children and don't need all the room, so I might as well give it to him. I replied I wasn't giving him anything, and he never offered to pay my rent. If I let him move in, I'd still have to pay the entire mortgage on my own house while not being allowed to live there. Jason then informed me that he shouldn't have to pay rent since his family comes first, and our parents assured me that I would do this and that. He yelled, as if their words were law or something. I told Jason that they didn't have the authority or power to offer him my house. Then, right on time, my parents and sister-in-law barged back in through the front door and encircled me in an attempt to force me to agree. There was a lot of fighting, but from this point forward, I heard the statement, "Just do it for Jason," more than I can remember. During the fight, I told them all that they had no say in my life or my house and should leave before I contacted the cops. My sister-in-law shouted the most at me, saying she was pregnant again and I couldn't do this to her. I said I did nothing to her. She basically expected she could take and take from me, as if I would simply allow it. I had no obligations to her or her family. Then I labeled her a stuck-up, who never respected me, therefore I don't care what she thinks or how many children she has. I have no pity for her. She will not be living at my house. Well, that enraged her enough to assault me. She landed a nice strike on my face and tried to do more, but my brother pulled her back, kicking and shouting. She was insisting that he let her go so she could scratch my eyes out. The phone I was carrying captured almost everything, so I held it up and threatened to call the police if they didn't leave right away. My parents told Jason that they were leaving. Then my mother told me I had a week to come to my senses. I told her I wouldn't be there and not to return. Then I informed my sister-in-law that my phone had recorded everything, and that if she tried anything, I would file charges for assault. She screamed at me and stormed out, screaming loudly and holding her face in her hands. My mother was the last one out the door, telling me that I needed to do this for Jason and my sister-in-law. I responded by saying I wouldn't be there. Update 1. As I mentioned in the first half of my piece, many people will find this unbelievable and lengthy. Yes, I am aware that there are already similar-sounding posts online. I've seen several of them lately. But those posters don't have a monopoly on this type of shit happening to them. If anything, I'm surprised this site hasn't been better weaponized against this type of behavior, given that entitled individuals should be more frightened of being exposed here. Anyway, I don't blame anyone who phones. I would too if I were reading this. However, after reading this and my first article, you'll understand how messed up my parents are. In my life, they were the source of all evil that spoiled my brother into the he is now. And they've never offered me a real reason why. And I fear there isn't one. Some individuals can't explain why they make decisions like kid favoritism, so all they can do is try to stand up for the child they supported, which is precisely what my parents tried to do. And I've almost completely destroyed their lives as a result. Not in the legal sense, but rather in an emotional one. After kicking out my parents, brother and sister-in-law for attempting to force me to hand over my new house to my brother, I immediately took to social media to tell the entire family the story. It spread quickly, but you won't find it anymore because it was all erased some time ago, and I made my own profile private. I posted about it because I knew the first thing my family would do when they got home was try to alter the events to make me the villain. And I was precisely correct. But I had about an hour to get started before they arrived, and I had video evidence to back up my story about what they did. No, I don't intend to show the video here, so don't ask. Being proactive paid off since I quickly gained support from a large number of family members. My dad, brother, and sister-in-law may have been planning their own post, but it was too late, so they didn't bother attempting to lie much. My dad, Jason, and sister-in-law had a few flying monkeys to help them, but not much else. Many others already knew how entitled they were, so what happened was easily understood and accepted. There was one particular person who called me. I'm not sure who they were, but they told me I was a terrible brother and that I needed to make room for a real family man. I immediately hung up and blocked the number. This was not a rerun. After a week, my parents showed up with Jason on my front porch, just as they had promised in their previous ultimatum. They rang my doorbell repeatedly and hammered on the door until I replied. I opened it just a crack, and they tried to push their way back in, but I'd added a couple of latch chains to block it, and I even held myself against the door for good measure. My father and brother begged me to allow them in, but I refused, saying I was filming everything and would call the cops if they tried to break in again. My mother soothed them and then, in her sickly sweet tone, asked whether I was ready to let my brother move in. I instructed her and the rest of them to go and never return. My mother shed crocodile tears and questioned why I couldn't just do this for Jason, my loving brother. I smiled and frankly stated that I do not love him as a brother because he treated me like that for years, and they merely encouraged him to do so. They are bad parents, and he is an awful brother. Then I ordered them to leave or I'd contact the cops right away. They all went remarkably quickly, save for my mother's loud wailing and the others' ugly looks. One could argue that making them leave was disturbingly simple. I thought the whole thing was over, but maybe I should have taken them more seriously because they had other ridiculous intentions. I returned home later that week on Friday evening to discover a moving truck and my brother's minivan parked in my driveway. Jason and his family were moving things in. When I spotted him, he merely waved and gave me a eating grin. I was enraged and ordered him and the rest of his family to stop. But my sister-in-law smugly informed me that, like it or not, they were moving in. And then, in the most phony way, while leaning her head and puckering her lips, she added that everything was fine because my mommy allowed it, and that I should always listen to my mother. I was filled with wrath just hearing those words and staring at her arrogant face. So I locked myself in my truck and called the cops right away. When they understood what I was doing, my sister-in-law began pounding on my window and screamed at me to stop, saying that I couldn't do this to her since she and Jason needed the house. She lamented, "Why can't you just do this for Jason?" I said, "Fuck Jason. It's my damn house, not his." Then she threatened to key the side of my truck if I stopped contacting the cops, which the 911 operator overheard due to the window being slightly open. I told my sister-in-law that if she wrecked my truck, I would sue her, and she was clever enough to back down. When the cops arrived, Jason and his sister-in-law, together with their children, had barricaded themselves in my home. I informed the cops what had transpired and showed them my new driver's license, which included my current address. When we got to my front door, I noticed that they had changed the lock, and the old lock was resting on the porch with the center drilled out, and the drill they used was there next to it, along with a full Harbor Freight drill bit set. Could they have been any more dumb to leave evidence out like that? I pointed out the damaged lock and drill, then gave the cops a summary of everything that had happened before. Jason must have phoned our parents after I returned home, because they arrived while I was speaking with the cops. My parents instantly lied, claiming that I had agreed to rent my house to my brother and his family. I stated that it was an easily proven untruth in one way or another. So Jason and my sister-in-law finally emerged from my house with some paperwork in hand. They both looked pleased, as if they had outsmarted me. They had created and printed a bogus rental agreement, but it did not include my signature. There was a signature, but it did not look like my handwriting. I don't think any of them have ever seen my signature, thus that was extremely stupid of them. I told my dad and Jason that it was absurdly obvious fraud, and if the cops investigated, they'd easily figure it out. I stated that I did not believe they would benefit from going to jail or court. It could even cost Jason his job, which is his only source of income for his family. I also stated that if anything of mine was lost, stolen, or broken, I would hire a lawyer and file a lawsuit for damages, as well as notify CPS. When I told Jason all of this, he turned white and appeared terrified. But my mother intervened and insisted that I do this for Jason and live in the blasted camper so they could finally have a family home to themselves. I exclaimed at her that if she thought it was a good idea, she could do it herself and give Jason her house instead. The cops separated my mother and me, and I told them they needed to go right now or I would press charges. I yelled that they drilled through my front door lock to break in, that the lease papers were clear forgeries, that they had badly forged my signature, and that I had videotaped my sister-in-law hitting me. Those are felonies I could fuck over their lives if I so desired. And if they did not go, that is exactly what I would do. The only reason I hadn't done it sooner was for Jason's children. They had one chance to get out. When my parents heard that, I believe it dawned on them that they couldn't force me to do it for Jason. My mother finally gave up and declared she'd put an end to it. She then went over to her sister-in-law and spoke quietly with her for a minute, while my father spoke with Jason. My sister-in-law immediately began crying and shredding up the false rental papers into little parts and flinging them like confetti, only to have an officer order them to pick up the pieces of paper or he would fine them for littering. At this moment, both cops got the "I don't get paid enough for this" expression on their faces. Jason had to start asking his children to pack their belongings back into the moving truck. The kids were all crying, with the eldest sobbing because he wouldn't get his own room now. Sister-in-law and Jason collected their children to try one more lame attempt to guilt me with a sad family performance, in which they all cluster together in a type of group hug while all facing the same way. I swear they had practiced it before. All of the kids had the same begging expressions and quivering mouths. My sister-in-law started caressing her pregnant belly and drooping her head to look like a sad puppy, while my brother simply made the saddest face he could and pleaded, "Please don't do this. We should be allowed to live here." But I didn't hesitate and instructed them to continue packing. All of the kids and my sister-in-law started crying, and Jason roared at me, "Are you satisfied with yourself? You've denied us a house because you're too self-centered to share and support our family." I ended up laughing like crazy and retorting that what he was attempting to do was take, not share, and that no amount of tears would convince me to let his family move in, because he is no longer my brother. He's just an entitled jerk who believes he can take anything he wants from me, just like when we were kids. Jason began F-bombing me until the authorities told him to stop or he'd be arrested, regardless of whether I wanted to press charges. He sucked in his lips, his expression a mixture of fear and rage. I asked the cops if they could stay until my parents, brother and sister-in-law had departed, and they stated they wouldn't leave until this was handled. In fact, 2 cops turned into 4 in the next few minutes as more cars arrived. For whatever reason, this gave my parents an extra push to get started. I made Jason give me the keys to the new lock he'd installed on my front door, even though I ended up getting another lock the next day since I wasn't sure whether he had duplicate keys. He was quite reluctant to hand them over. Then, instead of handing them to me, he flung them down the street and into a storm drain, telling me to go get them myself. But one of the cops chastised him for it and ordered him to go collect them. He had to remove the grate off to get to them, and he got somewhat dirty in the process. When he got the keys back, he snarled and slammed them down in my hand. I then told everyone to go and never come back. My mother stated I'd be disowned for this, as if it were a threat to me, and I told them that then. I jokingly remarked something along the lines of, "Oh no, that means I won't be able to come to any holidays with you guys, where I always get treated like shit by you all anyway because Jason has always been your obvious favorite. You mistreated me as a child, so if Jason ever needed an organ donor, I would refuse to give him anything. So do what you always instructed me to do when I was abused by all of you. Suck it up." My parents were taken aback when I said all of that, and the quartet of cops looked quite scornful at them as well. I tell you, if you want to put terrible parents like mine on the spot, confront them in front of cops because they are unlikely to do anything stupid then. My mother started crying and going away. My father stood there, looking like he wanted to punch me, while Jason hugged his children in defeat. Oh, and my sister-in-law was having a tantrum on my front lawn. They eventually formed a line, handed out boxes and left my residence. Nothing had been unpacked yet, so everything was pulled out immediately. But as I was doing it, my mother continued telling me that it wasn't too late and that I could still do it for Jason, each time trying to haggle harder to persuade me to alter my mind. She said Jason could pay the rent if I let them remain. When that didn't work, she suggested I move back in with them and let Jason rent my house so I didn't have to share the building. I urged her to shut up and keep packing boxes because I don't want Jason or his family around. I don't want his money, and I don't ever want to live with him or my parents again. Making a bargain with my parents felt like making a pact with the devil after how they treated me as a child. My sister-in-law threw another tantrum after hearing that. She put a box down and sat on the ground, having a pity party since she didn't want to return to living with my parents. She just sat there, angry and heartbroken, until everyone else had finished. She didn't want to get up when it was time to go. They eventually moved everything out of the house and into the truck. So, Before they went, I ripped into my parents one last time about all of the things they put me through growing up, and with 4 officers standing there, they couldn't do much more than stand there and take it for once. I called them out on a variety of incidents, including how they couldn't simply do something nice for me, such as allowing me to stay with my camper when I was homeless and trying to get back on my feet. How they let Jason and his sister-in-law mock me and label me a bum. So who is the bum now? They wanted to kick me out of my house so Jason could stay for free. However, when I needed a place to stay, they wanted to charge me more than I could afford simply to park my camper because they knew I was out of work. When I told them all of it, the cops gave me even more scornful looks. So I put my parents on the spot once more, asking them what I had done aside from being born to deserve being treated so poorly. Because when I finally achieve any success in life, they want to take it away from me for their favored child. They'd rather I give everything to Jason and keep nothing for myself. I bought my house using the money I earned. I owe them nothing. And I will never ask them for anything else because they clearly see me as nothing more than a doormat or a cash cow. I received no responses from them. They just stood there, like fish out of water. So I continued to rant and ask them what in God's name made them believe they were such good parents after all of that. This time my father's face was flushed with embarrassment rather than rage. And my mother was crying, saying she was a terrible person. I openly agreed that she is a terrible person, and I bet they'll go to hell for it. They were all aware that they were horrible individuals. But if I had called them out on all of this in private rather than in public, they would have gotten angry and continued to act as if I was in the wrong. They simply maintained the denial for so long that it became ingrained in their personality. My mother buried her face in my father's jacket, crying, and my father appeared more defeated than I had ever seen him. Jason and his family avoided me completely as they finished packing everything back into the moving truck. I made certain that nothing of mine was stolen, despite the fact that I hadn't had much time to acquire any furnishings. I was lucky to have a couch at the time. They all got back in their cars and my sister-in-law just stayed there glaring at me with hate until my brother convinced her to drive the minivan home. And as soon as they were gone, I rushed back online and told everyone what had happened. My parents were too humiliated to try to justify their behavior this time. And while the family was slightly divided prior to this occurrence, it was now overwhelmingly in my favor. Following this incident, nearly the entire family has come out in support of me. And those who haven't just aren't siding with anyone, no matter how many times my parents attempted the "we did it for Jason" excuse. No one was listening anymore. As a result, they no longer have any familial support. Many members of the family, including the erstwhile flying monkeys, sided with me, despite my expectations. So I suppose they'd had enough. Around that time I offered to entertain half of the family for Christmas Eve at my new home. My folks weren't invited. Surprisingly, I was not blocked on the profiles of my brother and sister-in-law, and I saw that my sister-in-law delivered her 4th child in early November. They still live with my parents. I'm quite sure they knew I was watching because my sister-in-law kept posting passive-aggressive comments about not having enough space while living with my parents, most likely to see if she could still blame me. And I'm sure it's driving my mother and father insane, because they can't get any peace and quiet in their old age with 3 boisterous, obnoxious kids, a mentally unstable sister-in-law, my golden child brother, and a newborn baby, all in the house at the same time. Perhaps they could relocate into a camper in their own backyard and let Jason take over their entire house. They could find some serenity then. Yeah. They could do it for Jason. There were meant to be more, but this post became far too long, so I'll release part 3 later. Update 2. I was attempting to keep things to 2 posts, but upon assembling everything, I discovered that part 2 was simply too long. So I separated it into 3 parts. For those who commented en masse, I will acquire cameras when I can afford them. I'm still recovering financially from buying a property last year. And as far as I know, nice cameras require a decent computer to record on, and I don't have anything more than a 3-year-old laptop running Windows 10. Yes, I'm aware of doorbell cameras and those will be the first I get. For those who kept telling me that I should have jailed my brother and sister-in-law, the only reason I didn't was that they were parents. Their children need them. And if Jason gets caught, he will most likely lose his job, which would leave his family without any money. My sister-in-law has a baby that is only a month old right now. Neither of them should find themselves in jail. However, vengeance does not require jail time. Yes, the police can help. But I got paid back without making a police report. Would I be so merciful again? Most likely not. They are fully aware of this. I opted not to create an account or post until after the new year just in case anything else happened. And it did. As previous readers know, my sister-in-law was posting passive-aggressive social media posts that were clearly intended at me. especially after welcoming her fourth child in November. She kept posting the same repeated crap, she only changed the words slightly. But she just kept repeating that she was bored of living with my parents, that there wasn't enough space, that she needed her own place, blah blah blah. I realize I sound dismissive, but if you went through what I did with these folks, you'd be ready to sarcastically play little violins in front of them as well. They're just so terrible. And as expected, more happened after I waited until January to create an account. I previously indicated that I had invited half of the family to a Christmas Eve gathering at my house, and everyone I invited showed up, despite the fact that it was a rather long trip for them, about 3 to 4 hours. However, they wanted to attend and show me their support. They congratulated me a lot for working so hard to get a house on my own, and they apologized for everything I had gone through. I was questioned why I didn't just take my camper and drive the 3 hours back to them rather than live essentially homeless for so long, and I had to acknowledge, shyly, that I was extremely connected to living here. This area provided me with the best employment prospects. My hometown doesn't have many fantastic career chances in my industry, if any at all, therefore I wanted to make my own path as much as possible. Overall, they accepted the answer. We went on to have a fantastic party, the finest I'd been to in years. Some relatives even donated CDs of amazing Christmas records, and I must say that the one my uncle gave of Ray Charles was my favorite. I've never heard anyone else perform Christmas tunes like he does. It was a grand and happy occasion. I felt like I could finally forget about my problems and enjoy the moment. But I wouldn't be writing this if things had stayed that way. Around 2 hours into the celebration, you know who showed up. My parents, brother and sister-in-law came in, attempting to smile. They didn't even knock, just marched right inside my front door as if they were supposed to be there. I turned off the music and instructed them to leave immediately. They begged to stay, and said they had brought gifts. One of my uncles stood up and yelled at them before I had another chance to speak. He said they didn't deserve to be in my home or my life after they attempted months before, and he was supported by several other relatives. Mind you, this person is my mother's brother, and he used to adore her until he learned about that occurred between me and my parents. My grandparents, my mother's parents, as old as they are, immediately intervened and told my parents that if they wanted to make peace with me, it was far too soon. They've never been more disappointed with them as they were this year. They'd kept their affection for my brother hidden from inquisitive eyes for a long time. But nobody was fooled anymore. And if they ever wanted to be a part of my life again, they needed to make a concerted effort to treat me like a son. Then they went to Jason and sister-in-law saying they had seen the repeated crap sister-in-law was posting about. They are tired of it and want to let it go. My house will not be their new home. My sister-in-law returned to her old ways of crying and having pity parties about how she should be the one living here, not me. She plopped down in a chair to throw a tantrum, complaining that it wasn't fair that I had this house to myself when I didn't have a family of my own, whereas she had 4 children who required more space. She explained that all she wanted was a better location to live and to feel like a real mom. It was petty of me, but I loudly stated that she fails as a mother because she lets my mother handle most of the parenting while she sits on her buttocks all day drinking, playing on her phone, or going out and wasting all of Jason's money. And she had the audacity to complain about it? I even remarked that I'm amazed her baby doesn't get drunk from her breast milk because she drinks so much, which admittedly went a little too far, as I received some glances. My sister-in-law demanded to know whether I was calling her a horrible mother. I responded, "The evidence speaks for itself. And if she wants to be able to leave my parents' house someday, she needs to put her college degree to good use, obtain a job and learn to save money. My mother already performs the majority of the child care for my brother's children, so she'll have plenty of time, especially as her baby grows older." My brother's eldest child, who is 7 years old, raced up and began kicking and screaming at me for yelling at his mother. He kept ranting that I was the horrible man who made her weep and refused to let them reside here. My brother grabbed his son to pull him away, but all of the other relatives joined in, and this evolved into a family intervention against my sister-in-law and brother. She cried. Her newborn infant was sobbing. Her children were weeping. Even Jason was nearly in tears at the verbal assault he was receiving. He ended up sitting on the ottoman where I store my shoes beside the front door, looking like a complete wreck. He couldn't look anybody in the eyes. He couldn't even say 2 words to me, not with the entire house full of angry people waiting to judge him. If they hadn't gotten in his way, I'm sure this would have ended up as when he tried to order me around and take my house months ago. By this point, however, he had been so humiliated that his and my parents' reputation in the family had been entirely ruined. Because everyone had taken off their masks. Soon after, my parents, brother and sister-in-law all fled in defeat. The celebration resumed, and we all avoided discussing what had just happened for the remainder of the evening. Because the majority of the grown-ups had been drinking, everyone spent the night at my place. I even let some of them sleep in the camper to make sure there was adequate space. I confess, it also works well as a guest house. My relatives had also requested a tour of it previously, and they couldn't believe I'd been living there for around 2 years. I received a lot of inquiries about it, such as what the summer and winter were like. I woke up earlier than everyone else on Christmas morning, with a fresh pot of coffee and some ibuprofen in case any of them had spiked eggnog hangovers. I was congratulated for being a far finer host than my parents ever were, and we all promised to do it again next Christmas. After Christmas, my sister-in-law eventually stopped making apparent digs at me and erased all of her prior posts. However, just after the new year, she posted a new post whining about how she tried to get my parents to buy a camper like I did so it could be put up in the backyard, and Jason and his family could use the entire house as their family home. Well, it's never fun to taste one's own medicine, and my parents strongly opposed the idea. I've heard that no one is going to force them out of their own home, let alone their main bedroom. The post was only online for a few days before my sister-in-law took it down, and she hasn't posted anything since then. She likes to complain, but if a tree falls and no one hears it, can it still complain? Sister-in-law, I assume, has recognized there's no purpose in doing it if no one hears her. And Jason cannot afford to relocate his family out on his own salary anytime soon. I would not be surprised if they have another child within the next few years. Things have settled down for me since then. I've even asked some pals around for poker night. I'm terrible at poker because I can't remember anything, but who cares? We get to drink beer and eat junk food while acting like morons. We all stocked up on Whoppers from Burger King and went at it the best way 4 mature men can when they just want to have a good time and get pissed drunk. Maybe around the summer I'll look into dating someone. I am not exactly getting younger here. Fingers crossed that everything goes smoothly. My camper is currently sitting idle in my yard, and I'll admit that some days I go out there just to spend time in it. I lived in it for 2 years. It feels like my second home, and maybe one day I'll be able to utilize it for camping as intended. I've never gone camping. My folks thought it was a waste of time, so this will be an entirely new experience for me. This is pretty much the conclusion of what transpired. My parents, brother and sister-in-law have all steered clear of me. In fact, they appear to have returned to their previous behavior of ignoring me before I purchased a home. Not that it worries me at all. It's better that way. But they will inevitably return in some form. I know they will. I wonder what idiotic thing they'll do next. If anything noteworthy like this happens again, I will write another post. If the account is still active.